Her name wasn't even supposed to be there. The roster was taped to the bulletin board outside the Navy SEAL training facility, the ink still smudged from the printer. Candidates crowded around, eager, cocky, their voices echoing off the concrete walls. These men had spent years preparing for this moment, weights lifted, miles run, limits shattered. Each believed he had a shot at glory, at the trident that marked them as part of the most elite fighting force on Earth. Then someone noticed it. Eva Torres? What the hell is this? One of the candidates sneered, stabbing the paper with his finger. His buddies burst into laughter. A ripple of amusement spread through the group. They stepped aside as the name's owner approached, a woman in standard-issue training fatigues, her hair neatly tied back, her expression unreadable. She stood barely 5'6", compact and lean, a stark contrast to the hulking men around her. Must be a clerical error, another scoffed. Sweetheart, this isn't yoga class. The laughter grew louder, bouncing off the steel walls of the compound. Even a couple of instructors chuckled under their breath. One commander leaned over to another and muttered, "Who let admin slip this through? She won't last 5 minutes." But Ava didn't laugh. She scanned the roster, her brown eyes locking on her name, printed as clearly as theirs. Mistake or not, it was there. And to her, that meant something. When roll call began, the lead instructor barked out each name with the force of a gunshot. The men responded with thunderous, "Here, sir." Then it came. Torres Eva. A hush fell. Even the seagulls overhead seemed to pause mid-flight. Eva straightened, heels clicking together. "Here, sir." Her voice cut clean through the air, unwavering. The instructor's jaw tightened. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at her. Torres? Female candidate? This isn't... Hold on. He flipped through his papers, irritation rising. The others snickered. "Sir," Eva said firmly, "my name is on that list. I'm reporting as ordered." A ripple of disbelief swept through the ranks. One of the men muttered, "She's serious." Another whispered, "This is gonna be good." The instructor exhaled slowly, then turned to the senior commander standing nearby. The commander, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the kind of glare that could strip paint off a wall, folded his arms. "Torres," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Do you understand where you are? This is Navy SEAL qualification. The hardest program on Earth. Candidates here drop out before sunrise. You don't belong in this lineup." Eva met his eyes without flinching. "Respectfully, sir, I'm here to compete. My name's on the roster." "You said it yourself. This is the hardest program on Earth. Shouldn't that mean you accept anyone who dares to stand here?" For a moment, silence pressed down like a storm about to break. The men shifted, uncomfortable. Some expected her to be dragged out, dismissed like a trespasser. Others grinned, eager to see her humiliated. The commander studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, with the faintest flicker of something, curiosity maybe, he stepped back. "Fine, you want in? You'll regret it. Begin." The whistle blew. The first run across the sand pounded into motion, boots slamming, bodies surging forward. Eva ran with them. At first, the men surged ahead, their longer strides chewing up the distance. She lagged slightly, her smaller frame swallowed in the stampede. A few glanced back, smirking. "See? Won't last." But she didn't stop. Her breathing fell into rhythm, controlled, precise. 1 mile turned into 2. Then 3. The sun bore down, sweat stinging eyes, sand grinding in boots. One man stumbled. Another slowed, hands on his knees. By mile 5, the first candidate dropped out, gasping for water. The instructors shook their heads unfazed. This was routine. Eva kept running. Her face remained calm, determined. She wasn't the fastest, but she was steady, unyielding. Every time a voice in her head whispered quit, another voice answered louder. Not yet. The laughter from earlier started to fade. Some competitors began to glance at her differently, not with amusement, but with something closer to unease. By the time they finished the first grueling circuit, sweat-soaked and exhausted, Ava stood among them. Not first, not last, just there, solid, unbroken. The commander approached, his eyes narrowing as if trying to see past the uniform into whatever engine kept her moving. "Torres," he said, voice flat. "You proved you can finish the warm-up. But that's all it was. The real tests are coming. When they hit, you'll wish you'd stepped aside." Ava met his stare, sand clinging to her face, chest rising and falling. "With respect, sir," she said, her tone calm but fierce, I don't wish for easy tests. I came here for the hardest. The commander studied her for a long moment, then gave a slight nod, not of approval, but acknowledgement. The men looked on, some shaking their heads, others whispering bets about how quickly she'd break. But one thing was certain, she wasn't supposed to be there. Yet somehow, she was, and destiny doesn't make mistakes. The first challenge wasn't just meant to test strength, it was designed to break people. The obstacle course stretched across the training ground like a cruel joke. 20-foot rope climbs, walls slicked with mud, tunnels so tight even the strongest men clawed at the earth like trapped animals. The final stretch ended with a 50-pound log drag, followed by a swim through ice-cold water that stole the breath of even the toughest candidates. No one ever walked off this course with dignity. They either finished crawling or quit halfway, and every pair of eyes was on Eva Torres. "Candidates, line up!" the instructor barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the morning fog. Eva stood among them, the only one without a trace of bravado. While others beat their chests, stretching, boasting about how fast they'd finish, she stayed silent, her gaze locked on the course as if memorizing every cruel twist. On my mark. Go! The air exploded with movement. Boots thundered forward, men vaulting over the first wall with practiced ease. Eva sprinted with them, her smaller frame weaving through the crowd. She hit the wall, fingers gripping the rough wood, legs pumping. She struggled for a second, the weight of her body straining against gravity. A few men slowed just enough to sneer. "This is where she quits," one muttered. But then, she vaulted over, landing hard, knees bent, rolling into the next sprint. The rope climb came next, thick, coarse, nearly 30 feet into the sky. The men launched upward like machines, hands and legs locked, bodies straining. Eva jumped, caught the rope, and began climbing. Her arms trembled but didn't falter. Inch by inch, she pulled herself higher. Below, she heard muffled laughter. She's wasting energy. Dead weight. Halfway up, sweat stung her eyes, her grip slipping slightly. Her mind screamed at her to let go. But another voice answered. The voice that had carried her through sleepless nights, family struggles, and years of being underestimated. One more pull. Just one more. She locked her legs tighter, hauled herself upward, and slapped the bell at the top with a sharp ring that cut through the jeers below. By the time she descended, the laughter had thinned, then came the mud trenches. Narrow, suffocating, filled with stagnant water that smelled of rust and rot. The men dove in headfirst, wriggling through like animals clawing for daylight. Eva followed, mud caking her uniform, the stench choking her throat. The walls pressed in, dirt collapsing against her shoulders. Panic clawed at her chest, a primal fear whispering, "You're trapped. You can't breathe." She closed her eyes, forcing her lungs to steady. She thought of nights spent under collapsed rubble during hurricane relief missions, of digging her way out with bare hands while others screamed for rescue. If she had survived that, she could survive this. Her arms surged forward, pulling, dragging, crawling until daylight burned her eyes and air filled her lungs again. She emerged, soaked, coughing, but alive. The course wasn't finished. Not even close. The log drag waited at the far end. Each candidate had to heave a 50-pound log across the sand, a task that turned legs into stone and lungs into fire. "Move it, Torres," an instructor barked as she reached the pile. Eva bent down, gripping the rough wood. Splinters bit into her palms. The log barely budged at first, her smaller frame straining under its weight. Around her, men laughed openly now, convinced this would finally break her. "Come on, sweetheart. That log's heavier than you are. Call it quits before you embarrass yourself." But Eva gritted her teeth, muscles screaming, and lifted. Step by step, the log scraped across the sand. Inch by inch, she dragged it forward, her boots sinking deep, her breath ragged. The laughter started to fade again. One man watching shook his head. "No way! She's actually moving it. It wasn't fast. It wasn't graceful." But she didn't stop. Then came the water. A pool of ice-cold ocean water waited at the finish line. Candidates had to plunge in, swim the length, and haul themselves out with strength they no longer had. One by one, men dove in, some powering through, others thrashing desperately against the cold. Eva stepped to the edge, her body shivering even before she touched the surface. The water looked black, endless. "Torres," an instructor called out, voice mocking. You sure you want to freeze to death in there? This is your chance to quit. She didn't answer. She dove. The cold was a knife across her skin, 1,000 needles stabbing at once. Her lungs seized, her body demanded retreat. But she kicked, arms slicing through the water. Stroke after stroke, her body cut forward. The cold wanted to claim her, but her will burned hotter. She thought of everyone who told her no, everyone who said you can't. She surfaced at the far end, gasping, eyes wild with determination. With one last surge, she hauled herself out, collapsing onto the sand as the whistle blew. The course was over. Candidates lay sprawled, some groaning, some coughing, others simply staring up at the sky in defeat. Eva Torres lay among them, soaked, shivering, every muscle on fire. But she was still there, still in the game. The instructors exchanged looks. One raised his eyebrows, almost impressed. "Not bad, Torres," another muttered under his breath. The men who had laughed earlier now avoided her eyes. The certainty that she'd quit had vanished, replaced by something they didn't want to admit: doubt. And doubt, in the Navy SEALs, was the first crack in a wall that once seemed unbreakable. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the fastest. But she had finished, and for the first time, the possibility crept into everyone's mind. Maybe she wasn't here by mistake after all. By the time the sun began to dip behind the horizon, the training compound looked like a battlefield. Bodies littered the sand. Strong men who had walked in that morning with swagger now sat slumped against walls, heads bowed, faces streaked with sweat and mud. Some nursed twisted ankles, others stared blankly into the distance, their spirits shattered. Out of 100 candidates, only 60 remained, and Eva Torres was one of them. The instructors wasted no time. "On your feet!" The command rang like a gunshot, dragging the survivors upright. The next phase began, a continuous round of physical tests designed not just to exhaust muscles, but to crush souls. Push-ups until arms buckled, sit-ups until the world spun, burpees until the body screamed rebellion. The goal wasn't strength. It was surrender. One by one, men broke. Candidate 34, drop. Candidate 51, ring out. The instructors didn't hide their amusement as bell after bell echoed across the compound. Candidates quitting, striking the brass with shaking hands, conceding defeat. Eva kept moving. Her arms trembled. Her chest burned and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. But she pushed through each rep, her rhythm steady, almost mechanical. Sweat soaked her uniform, caked with sand and grit. She was breaking. Everyone could see it. But she refused to stop. The men began to notice. At first, they had mocked her, their laughter loud and cruel. But now, between gasps of breath and choked curses, they started stealing glances. "Is she still going?" One whispered. "She's not even the fastest," another muttered. "But she's still here." There was no laughter left. Only silence broken by the sound of her boots hitting the ground in perfect cadence with the rest. When the instructor barked, 5-mile run, now. The candidates groaned. Some cursed under their breath. Their legs were lead, lungs raw, but Eva just ran. The pack surged ahead, but fatigue clawed them down. One man tripped, another slowed to a crawl. Soon, the confident few who had sprinted early fell behind, overtaken by the steady pace of those who conserved their strength. Eva wasn't the fastest, but she never slowed. Her rhythm was like a heartbeat, constant, unyielding. By the 4th mile, men began dropping out, collapsing on the sand, begging for water. The instructors didn't stop the clock. Eva's breaths came ragged, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. Her uniform clung to her like a second skin, soaked with sweat and salt. Every muscle in her body screamed, but she kept moving, and when the whistle finally blew, she crossed the finish line still running. That night, as the exhausted candidates sprawled on the ground, the instructors called for silence. One instructor, a barrel-chested man with a scar running down his cheek, walked slowly down the line. His eyes swept over the group, cold and calculating. "Do you know what separates Navy SEALs from the rest of the world?" he barked. "It's not muscles. It's not ego. It's this." He tapped his temple, then his chest. "The mind and the heart. When your body breaks, these are what carry you forward." He stopped in front of Eva. The silence thickened. "Candidate Torres," he said, his voice mocking but tinged with curiosity. "You think you've got what it takes?" You think endurance makes you special? Eva looked up at him, dirt streaked across her face. Her lips cracked from dehydration. Her voice came out hoarse but steady. I don't think, sir. I know. A ripple moved through the candidates. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others bit back grins of respect. The instructor studied her for a long moment, his scar twitching with the faintest hint of a smile. Then he moved on without another word. As darkness fell, the candidates were ordered into the surf. The Pacific waves crashed cold and merciless, swallowing them whole. Shoulder to shoulder they lay in the water, waves slamming over their heads, salt burning their eyes, sand grinding against their skin. The instructors shouted over the roar of the sea. This is where men quit! This is where the weak tap out! The candidates shivered violently, teeth chattering, bodies convulsing from the cold. Some cried out. Some cursed the ocean. Some begged the instructors to end it, and then, through the chaos, a sound rose. It wasn't a cry, it wasn't a curse, it was a voice. Eva's voice. She began to sing, not loud, not boastful, but steady. A tune from her childhood, simple, defiant, carrying over the waves. At first the men laughed, thinking she'd lost her mind. But slowly the sound wove into them, cutting through despair. One by one, voices joined in. Not singing, but shouting cadences, the rhythmic chants of soldiers refusing to quit. The instructors looked at each other, surprised. They hadn't seen this before. A candidate, let alone her, igniting the group when all hope was supposed to be drowned. By the time the whistle finally blew, the men staggered out of the water, half dead from cold. But their eyes were different. They no longer looked at Eva with mockery. They looked at her with respect. Later, as they huddled around a dim fire, too exhausted to speak, one candidate broke the silence. You don't talk much. Torres, he muttered, his voice cracking with fatigue. But when you do... He shook his head, almost smiling. It's loud. Eva said nothing, just stared into the flames, her body trembling but her spirit unshaken. She hadn't just survived the day. She had silenced every doubt in the compound. And the night was still young. The night came fast, the kind that swallowed the horizon without warning. By the time the last streak of red faded from the sky, the candidates stood shivering on the beach, their bodies wrecked from the day's punishments, and then the storm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the heavens, lightning splitting the sky in jagged white veins. The wind howled off the Pacific, carrying sheets of icy rain that hammered down like bullets. The ocean, already restless, transformed into a beast, waves crashing with the fury of war drums. The instructors smiled. Perfect night, one muttered. On your feet, candidates, the lead instructor barked. His voice carried through the storm, cruel and sharp. Welcome to hell. The next phase was survival training. No beds, no shelters, just a storm designed to strip away every last ounce of willpower. The candidates were ordered into teams and given nothing but a single pack of rations. Make it through the night, the instructor growled, or ring the bell. Most men looked defeated before it even began. Their bodies sagged, their eyes hollow. Some muttered prayers, others curses. But all knew one truth. More would quit before sunrise. Eva Torres didn't pray. She didn't curse. She just stared at the raging ocean, her jaw set. The night unfolded like a war. The rain never let up. It pelted their skin until it felt raw, until they could no longer tell where sweat ended and water began. The cold seeped into their bones, a slow, merciless invasion that no amount of grit could ignore. Some candidates huddled together, desperate for warmth, their teeth chattering so loud it drowned out their whispers. Others tried to move constantly, push-ups, squats, running in place, but the storm made mockery of their efforts. By midnight, 5 more had quit. Their silhouettes were seen staggering toward the brass bell, each strike echoing like a funeral toll against the roar of thunder. Eva fought the cold differently. She remembered a lesson from her childhood, her grandmother teaching her to endure hardship, not by fighting it, but by embracing it. The storm doesn't ask for your permission, Nina, her grandmother used to say. You cannot resist it. You let it in, let it pass through you and still stand. So she didn't shiver. She didn't curse. She let the rain wash over her, the cold consume her, and in some strange way she welcomed it. The others noticed. Is she smiling? One candidate muttered, teeth clattering. No, another whispered, staring through the rain. She's not breaking, she's calm. At 0200 hours, the instructors unleashed the next test. Team carry, they roared. Each squad, pick up your log. You don't put it down until we say. The logs were massive, slick with rain, heavier now from the water that soaked into their fibers. 6 men to a log, shoulders straining under the crushing weight. Eva's squad hesitated, eyes flicking to her. Some still doubted her strength, expecting her to be the weak link that dragged them down. But when the log was lifted, she stepped in without hesitation, wedging her shoulder against the soaked wood. The impact jarred her bones, drove the breath from her lungs, but she didn't flinch. Lift, she shouted over the storm, her voice cutting sharp through the chaos. Her squad obeyed. They stumbled forward together, the log digging into muscle and sinew, every step an agony. But somehow Eva set the rhythm. Her smaller frame kept the log level, her command steady, her pace unbroken. Hours passed. Some teams dropped their logs and quit. Others collapsed in the sand, their bodies refusing to rise again. But Eva's team kept moving, and when the instructors finally blew the whistle, ordering them to set the log down, her squad collapsed not in frustration but in awe. Damn, one of them muttered, panting, staring at her through the rain. She's tougher than half the men here. The others didn't argue. The storm raged on. By 0400, the beach was littered with the broken. Candidates curled up in the sand, their faces pale, their bodies shuddering uncontrollably. The instructors stalked among them like wolves, barking at those on the edge. Ring out, candidate. You're done. But not Eva. She stood at the edge of the surf, staring out into the black horizon, waves exploding around her. Her clothes clung to her skin, her lips were blue, her body shaking violently, but her eyes burned like fire. It was then that the instructors gave the final trial of the night, the drown-proofing drill. Candidates were ordered into the surf. Wrists tied, ankles bound. They had to survive in the water, tossed by waves with no ability to swim traditionally. The ocean was merciless, dragging them under, flipping them like rag dolls. Some panicked instantly, thrashing against their bindings, screaming for rescue. A few were pulled out, sputtering, broken. Eva dove headfirst. The water swallowed her, crushing cold, wrapping her in darkness. Her lungs screamed for air, panic clawing at her chest. But instead of fighting, she let herself sink, her body loose, her mind calm. She remembered her grandmother's words again. Let it pass through you. Her body found rhythm, knees tucked, chest expanding in tiny bursts, lungs conserving air. She bobbed with the waves, rolling when they crashed, letting the ocean carry her instead of resisting. Minutes passed. The instructors watched closely, waiting for her to break, but she didn't. While others flailed, Eva looked almost serene, her body flowing with the water, her eyes closed, her mind somewhere far beyond pain and fear. When they finally dragged the candidates back to shore, Eva collapsed on the sand, coughing seawater. Her body was done, completely spent. But as she rolled onto her back, the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon. The storm was over. The survivors, few in number, lay scattered across the beach. Broken, battered, but alive. Eva Torres was among them, and though no one spoke it out loud, every man there knew the truth. She hadn't just survived the storm, she had mastered it. The storm was over, but the real test had only just begun. The morning sky was clear now, the kind of blue that looked innocent, almost kind, yet everyone standing on the beach knew better. The SEAL instructors had saved the most brutal challenge for last. It was called the Gauntlet. No man had ever finished it without breaking. For 10 years, the record time had remained untouched, a punishing combination of endurance, speed, and pain that stripped away every ounce of strength a body could offer. The candidates stood in line, trembling, some with eyes bloodshot from exhaustion, others with lips split and raw. Out of the 100 who had begun, barely 30 remained. Eva Torres stood among them. Her uniform was still damp, her hair plastered to her forehead, her skin pale from the night storm. But her eyes, those eyes burned. The commander stepped forward, his voice carrying across the beach like the crack of a rifle. "Candidates," he barked, "this is the final test." A 2-mile swim through open surf, followed by a 5-mile weighted run with 50 pounds strapped to your back. Then, he paused, letting the silence crush them. The obstacle gauntlet. You finish, you earn respect. You quit. You walk away with nothing. The men swallowed hard. Dread painted across their faces. The commander's gaze swept the line, lingering on Eva longer than the rest. A flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect, moved in his eyes. But his tone was merciless when he shouted, "Move!" The ocean was first. The candidates plunged into the surf, their bodies immediately numbed by the cold. Waves pounded down, pulling at them, dragging them under. Some surfaced coughing, already flailing. Eva dove cleanly, arms cutting through the water with a rhythm born of desperation and memory. She wasn't the fastest, not by a long shot, but she was steady. Stroke after stroke, she moved forward. Her lungs burned, her arms screamed, but she refused to stop. The surf fought her, pulling her sideways, forcing her to work twice as hard. But instead of panicking, she angled with the current, letting the ocean's strength guide her course. It wasn't about overpowering nature, it was about adapting to it. By the time she reached the shore, most of the faster men had already stumbled onto the sand, gasping. She wasn't first, but she wasn't last either. She was still in it. Then came the weighted run, 50 pounds strapped tight across her back, boots sinking into the sand, legs already screaming from the night before. 5 miles stretched endlessly before her, each step an act of defiance against the body's primal need to collapse. The stronger men surged ahead, their long strides devouring the distance. Eva started slower, her pace deliberate, her breathing controlled. The first mile claimed 3 men, collapsing into the sand, their bodies refusing to rise again. By the 3rd mile, 5 more had fallen, their faces twisted with agony. Eva kept moving, her shoulders burned, her back ached, her lungs felt like fire, but her rhythm never broke. One step, then another. Boots digging into the sand, pulling forward, steady as a drumbeat. By the time she reached the 5th mile, her legs nearly buckled. But she didn't stop. Not once. Then came the gauntlet. The obstacle course wasn't like the first one. This was worse. Twice the distance, twice the weight, twice the punishment. Ropes hung slick with salt water, walls caked with mud, tunnels tighter and darker, the log drag longer and heavier. And at the very end, the wall of fire. Candidates had to crawl under barbed wire while live flames burned just above, the heat blistering, the smoke choking. The men hesitated, fear in their eyes. Some shook their heads, already beaten before stepping forward. Eva stepped up. The first rope climb nearly tore her arms from their sockets, the weight on her back dragging her down. She gritted her teeth, pulling inch by inch until her hand slapped the bell at the top. The walls tore skin from her palms. The tunnels scraped her elbows raw. The log dragged behind her like an anchor determined to pull her under. But she didn't quit. Every time her body screamed enough, she answered with one more step. Every time her lungs begged her to stop, she whispered just a little further. Finally, the wall of fire. The flames crackled, the heat scorching even from a distance. Smoke curled low, stinging eyes, choking lungs. Candidates hesitated, some collapsing to their knees. Eva dropped to the ground. She crawled forward, elbows digging into the sand, the barbed wire inches above her back, the flames roaring just beyond. The heat blistered her skin, the smoke clawed at her lungs. She coughed, choking, her body begging her to stop, but she didn't. She crawled, inch by inch, foot by foot, through fire and smoke, until finally, she emerged on the other side. Her body collapsed into the sand, trembling violently, her uniform singed, her face streaked with ash. The whistle blew. Time. Silence fell across the compound. The instructors checked the stopwatch. They stared at it, then at Eva, then back at the time again. The commander stepped forward, his face unreadable. 10 years, he said, his voice carrying like thunder. For 10 years, no man has broken the record of this course. The candidates, still gasping, lifted their heads, confusion flickering across their faces. The commander's eyes locked on Eva. Torres just shattered it. By 3 minutes, the silence broke like glass. Some of the men stared at her in disbelief. Others lowered their heads, ashamed of their earlier laughter. A few, battered and broken themselves, gave the faintest nods of respect. Eva, still on her knees, didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply looked up, her chest rising and falling, her eyes steady. She had nothing left to prove. That day, history wasn't just made, it was rewritten, and it was written with her name. The stopwatch still ticked in the commander's hand, but no one moved. The candidates sat in the sand, broken and silent, their chests heaving as if the ocean itself pressed down on them. The instructors, men who had trained hundreds of warriors, who had seen giants rise and legends fall, stood frozen, because what they had just witnessed was impossible. Eva Torres, the woman who wasn't even supposed to be here, had not only finished the gauntlet, she had destroyed the record. For a long moment, the world held its breath, then the commander barked, "On your feet!" One by one, the candidates staggered up, some clutching their knees, others swaying on unsteady legs. Eva tried to rise but nearly collapsed. Her body had nothing left to give. But then she felt hands on her arms, two men, fellow candidates, the same ones who had mocked her days ago, lifting her up without a word. It wasn't pity. It was respect. The commander paced in front of them, his boots crushing the sand. His face was unreadable, his voice sharp. This program was built on blood, sweat, sacrifice. It does not bend. It does not compromise. And yet, he stopped in front of Eva, his shadow falling over her. Today it witnessed something none of us thought possible. The men held their breath. The commander's gaze locked with hers. His voice dropped low, almost reverent. "You didn't just pass. You set a new standard." Word spread fast. By the next morning, whispers rippled through the entire base. By the end of the week, every Navy SEAL team across the country had heard. Some dismissed it as rumor, a story inflated by exhaustion and adrenaline. Others demanded proof. The proof came when the official times were released. Eva Torres, first woman. Fastest record. Not everyone celebrated. Behind closed doors, there were debates in offices lined with flags and medals. Some high-ranking officers called it a fluke, a clerical mistake that should never have happened. She wasn't on the list, they argued. She didn't belong there. But others, the ones who had spent their lives in the field, saw the truth. They remembered the way she refused to quit when the storm nearly drowned her. They remembered the way she had crawled through fire while others froze. And they knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was the future. Eva herself didn't care about the debates. While commanders argued, she sat alone by the docks at night, staring out at the black water, her uniform still damp with salt. She thought about the girl she had been before all this, the one who grew up hearing, "You can't, you won't, you're not strong enough." Every insult, every laugh, every door slammed in her face. She carried it all here, to this exact moment, and now it was silent, because she had answered them all. Graduation day came. The surviving candidates stood in formation, uniforms sharp despite the scars hidden beneath. Families watched from the sidelines, eyes filled with pride. One by one, the names were called, tridents placed in hands that had bled for them. The men stood tall, their chests swelling as they accepted the symbol of becoming a Navy SEAL. Then, candidate Eva Torres. The silence was deafening. She stepped forward, her boots striking the ground with quiet certainty. The commander held the golden trident in his hand, the weight of tradition and history behind it. For a moment, he simply looked at her, the corners of his mouth tightening as if fighting the urge to smile. Then he pinned it to her uniform. "Welcome to the Brotherhood," he said. His voice didn't waver. Not once, the crowd erupted. Some in applause, some in disbelief, but no one could deny it anymore. Eva Torres had made history. That night, the surviving candidates sat around a fire pit, silent but for the crackling flames. No one boasted about their times. No one joked about the pain. They had all seen something bigger than themselves. One of the men finally broke the silence. He turned to Eva, his voice low but sincere. "They laughed when you showed up." She glanced at him. "Waiting. They're not laughing now." For the first time since it all began, Eva allowed herself a small smile. The record she set that day stood for years. It wasn't just about numbers on a stopwatch. It was about what it meant. Every candidate who came after, every soldier who faced the gauntlet, carried her shadow with them. They didn't see a mistake on a roster. They saw the woman who wasn't supposed to be there, who refused to leave, who fought, who broke through fire, who rewrote the rules. And long after the bruises faded and the debates ended, one truth remained. carved into the heart of the Navy SEALs themselves. Greatness doesn't care about permission. It only cares about those who refuse to quit. And Eva Torres? She had proved it in blood, sweat, and fire.